Welcome to the Digital Dreaming Off the Gridiron podcast. It is the day after Super Bowl 59. It is your boy Ali with Cortez Brands Jr., Marcus Montalvo, and we are rocking the real 15 today. If y'all watched this Super Bowl last year, Jawan Jennings, who would have won Super Bowl MVP, and the Niners won, if the refs didn't have some home cooking. But we'll get into that a bit. All right, y'all. All right, fellas. Marcus, you predicted. Let's get right into it. Marcus, you went ahead and predicted this game. If the game is called the way it is, those were your exact words last week. The Eagles will win. I was hesitant to agree with you based on how the postseason had gone leading up to the Super Bowl with how the referee calls were. But as we saw last night, Patrick Mahomes was sacked 6 times, the most in his career. The Eagles D line wreaked havoc all night. He also turned the ball over 3 times. They only scored, I believe, with 6 minutes left in the game. It was 40-6. So, I mean, that speaks for itself. Marcus, let me start off with you. What was your takeaways from last night, and kind of what is the aftermath of this blowout Super Bowl?
The Eagles' defense was insane. Let's just be honest. It looked like a professional team versus a D4 college team. It was bad. I went to Western Illinois. I know what a D4 team looks like.
Western
It's
is
bad.
not D4.
Western is a D4 team. If you look it up on
Well,
that, unless they've improved, it's
They weren't
D4.
they
So
weren't a D4 team back in the day. They might be now.
oh,
yeah, maybe they
they've been
are. Who
D4
knows?
since Madden of '05, I think. And I went in
Yeah.
'03.
I'm talking about the 80s. That's my references from the 80s.
Okay.
Neither of us were in college. No one on the call was in college in the 80s. I think we're all in diapers or pre.
My
Yeah,
my
yeah.
father actually went to Western in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
There you
Well,
go.
Yes, my father
so there
actually
we
went to
go.
Western in the 80s, and shout out to my dad because there's a possibility that we might get another famous 80 coming to hang out with us.
JR. We'll see. We'll see, y'all. I think
So
that's still
I'm trying. We're
TBD.
trying to
That's still
trying to get that
TBD.
worked out.
Well, let's still TBD. But anyway, sorry. Back to Marcus. Marcus, back
Yeah,
to
no,
a D4 team
it's
versus a pro team. Eagles
yeah.
obviously were outclassing the Chiefs. What is your takeaway from both the Chiefs' inability to move the ball, with Patrick Mahomes getting harassed every time he dropped back in the pocket, and his inability to escape the pressure, and kind of what is your take for kind of moving onwards to next season and beyond for both teams?
Honestly, I thought the Bears had switched jerseys and were on offense the whole time. So it looked very familiar to me. I mean, it was Mahomes' worst game since 2021, I think they said, game
Yes,
seven.
sir. Yes, sir.
So against the Titans. And I mean, it showed. I mean, like they were saying, everybody has their bad day, and he had a bad day. He just couldn't click, and then it started to click like the Bears late, but even then, just it was too little, too late. There was no way to move forward in that type of game when the Eagles just hadn't stopped. They were just pouring it on, and you can tell it was almost like vengeance, and it was served cold. It was served very cold, and hey, amen to that. I was excited to see it because I literally had only tuned in for about a
It,
quarter, and I was
it,
like, I'm
it
giving you a
wasn't week
quarter.
7, it was February 7th.
I know there was a seven in there, but yeah, either
And it
way.
was Tom Brady's Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Mhm.
That was the only game where Mahomes was worse than he
Oh no, no,
was
no, I'm
last
saying
night.
it was as poor as it wasn't his
Oh, it
worst. I
was
know it was
worse.
about yeah,
They only scored 9 points in that Super Bowl.
yeah,
But
yeah.
no, I mean, let's keep it a buck though. Mahomes' passer rating after the first quarter was 1, which was the lowest QBR passer rating of any
Oh
Super
yeah,
quarterback on
any
either
Super
side.
Bowl
Well,
quarterback.
when you have 16
No
completions
points.
and only 14 yards, there's a problem there.
There's absolutely a
Yeah,
problem there. Yeah, go
no
ahead.
points and a bunch of picks, including a
Yeah,
pick six to a
to the
rookie.
birthday boy. Yeah,
It's a birthday boy, Cooper DeJean. Shout out to Cooper, making the white
yeah,
boys, show that they can play corner.
They didn't want to break the record of having two guys on with their birthdays both score. Because if Saquon would have scored a touchdown, it would have been
yeah.
two guys on the same team having a birthday
That'd have been
scoring
dope.
on the Super Bowl. And
That'd have been dope.
I don't think you'll ever have a better birthday than winning the Super Bowl.
Oh, dude.
That's just my opinion.
Man, I 100% agree. I mean, that's A plus material. Plus, you're in New Orleans. Yeah, that's that's not a bad way to celebrate. So, I mean, as far as moving forward, I mean, Eagles just. hopefully they can keep the core elements together and the coaching, all that stuff. Obviously there's always changes at the end of a year like this, so we'll just have to see how that all plays out
I
in the
got
offseason.
bad news for all non-Eagles fans. Almost all those guys are locked up in the multi-year contracts, and the guys that
Yeah,
weren't locked up in the multi-year contracts were playing for a contract and want to be Philadelphia Eagles.
NFC is going to
So,
be really tough conference to be
well,
involved
the
in.
NFC is showing that it's a stronger conference, or
Mm,
it's showing that it's a stronger than the AFC,
yeah,
and that I
yeah,
think that shows. And look at the AFC East.
Absolutely.
yeah,
I mean, if you're in the AFC East, you almost have let's say you're a good team in the AFC East, you pretty much have a bye to the playoffs.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
was I was gonna say here's my takeaway, guys, because this is the kind of point I'm trying to get to. Okay,
yeah.
my takeaways were that obviously we talk about the refs and everything. When the refs called the game fairly, because when I went to this game last year and this man did his damn thing, the referees did not call a single holding call on the Chiefs' offensive line. Chiefs fans chalked that up to saying, "Oh, but Chris Jones and George Karlaftis and Mike Dana and Derek Nottie, they were all held by the Niners' offensive line. The refs didn't call that." But if you the eye test, it doesn't lie. I mean, Nick Bosa, like him or hate him, for whatever. I don't care what your opinion is about him, outside off the field, right?
Yeah.
8 minutes of highlights exist where Nick Bosa was getting held and not a single flag was thrown. Period. That might
Yeah.
sound salty. That might sound bitter. That might sound. I mean, I don't care what y'all want to say. Anyone watching, I don't care what y'all want to say. That's what I saw when I went to Vegas last year. What you said about the game being played the way it should be played, proof in the
Mhm.
pudding last night.
Oh
Niners
yeah.
Oh
didn't.
yeah,
Niners, unfortunately, were not on the fortunate end of that. Right? They basically got the Bill Vinovich home style cooking treatment for the Chiefs. Right? So essentially, the Niners end up losing both Super Bowls. That's on Kyle. We'll get into that a bit because that's what kind of what I want to get to in aftermath. Because
as
we're
I
gonna talk about.
always say, the more physical team in these types of games tends to win, especially when the referees are doing their jobs. And I don't mean taking little stuff on the side. I mean actually doing their jobs. So there's a couple of calls that I didn't agree with at the beginning of the game. And one went against each team. I didn't agree with the offensive pass interference call on the AJ Brown catch. To basically end up having them, have to punt the ball away. And I didn't agree with the defensive holding on against Kansas City. Um, I do believe that the referees gave them that back because they know they stole it from them in the first call. But the rest of the game was called pretty clean, aside from a missed call on a face mask for Patrick Mahomes and a hit to the head. I mean, I gotta say the game was called pretty fairly, and that call probably wouldn't have changed very much from the
Well, I
from
mean,
the
look at it
landscape
this
of the
way:
game.
if as long as those are like the three majors that you've even seen, I mean, not every roughing group is going to be able to get everything 100%. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a lot of people like ourselves that can rewind things, live action, and double check stuff, and whatever we need to do. But as long as it's not so egregious as it was in the playoffs with the Chiefs, and you see all these other
Well,
teams
I
that
mean
are
that was the
losing
entire season.
games, then yeah, it's pretty straight. So
And
The,
those
the
and the
Chiefs
last
came
three
from
seasons.
behind
Go ahead.
12 games this season. So this is
yeah,
how you know that the Chiefs were, and I've said this throughout the season, and I think Ali has said it as well. The Chiefs were a fraudulent team from the beginning.
Yeah.
Mhm.
12 games they were behind. They came back from behind 12 times to win games in the season. That is unheard of for any team ever in any season ever. We're talking
yeah,
about a Bears team that made it to the Super Bowl with almost no offense, and they didn't even have that problem.
yeah,
I mean, when
They
you
didn't
look
have.
at the Falcons game, for example, Cortez, right? Because when we were on here, like when the Chiefs got that favorable PI call against the Falcons, right? I mean, Kirk Cousins almost beat Patrick Mahomes, right? I mean, that tells you all you need to know about how fraudulent this team was. I'm going to go back to last season, not this past season, but last season when the Chiefs made the playoffs and they looked absolutely abysmal. Niners looked like the best team wire to wire in 2023.
Yes,
And
they did.
and then somehow they get to the Super Bowl and then the calls just didn't go their way. Of course, Niners should have played better. I mean, there was missed opportunities on both sides. Niners still could have iced the
yeah,
game even with the lack of calls. But there are too many tic tacky calls. Like for example, George Kittle getting called for pass interference. Trent Williams getting called for a hold, right? And the Chiefs ended up taking advantage of those calls, right? And they basically ended, and because of the fact Bill Vinovich was the head referee for the Chiefs' first Super Bowl against the Niners, which ultimately set the dynasty in motion, and was the head referee last year against the Niners, which again we saw the result of that game. That to me really kind of showed, like what we saw last night versus the last 2, 3 times the Chiefs have actually been in this position. If, like you two are to what we're talking about, if the referees call it down the middle, the Chiefs are a completely different team. If they get the
Yeah.
Well,
favorable, game-changing, pivotal calls, right? Then you see this dynasty wall beating team. But Patrick Mahomes looked absolutely normal last night.
hey, well,
Travis,
to your
yeah,
point though, look at how the whole season went, where you had no wins over 7 points practically. I mean,
exactly.
everything was within the touchdown, and then it's almost as if the refs had helped that along the whole season. And it's like, hey man, we're gonna make this close. We'll give it to you, but only because we want you to do us a favor and win 3 times in a row, so it can be some huge thing in the NFL. And I was like, a lot of people don't even care about that. If honestly, when the Patriots were doing well, it was like, oh, that's kind of cool. If they did it, it seemed a little bit more like, wow. But
Yeah.
honestly, nobody cares. A three-peat in
Well,
the NFL is not as exciting as a lot of people think it is.
there's one thing about that Patriots game that I have to point out because
Mm,
I've watched so many people try to throw this out there and say, "Oh, deflated football." There was 14 points with a quote unquote deflated football.
Right.
There was 21 points with the correct football. And so basically what you have here is saying if you say, "Oh, Tom's like, well, thanks for fixing the problem," because I put up more points with the regular football than a quote unquote deflated football. So
yeah,
obviously, it didn't help me in anything. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Regardless of the fact. So on Dude Perfect a week and a half ago, they made a joke about Tom Brady's throwing footballs. Tom Brady is just as accurate with a deflated football as he is with an inflated football,
Yeah.
meaning that Tom Brady could probably throw a dinner roll at you and land it in your mouth if your mouth's open. Okay, that's how accurate of a quarterback and how accurate of a passer he was because he wasn't very fast. He never was.
Correct.
He wasn't very fast as a 20-year-old.
Right.
And I want people to realize that in this sport, there are certain things that you can predict. Yeah, yes, it's any given Sunday, but
yeah.
there is no team that's going to have 12 games where they come from behind and win, especially on very controversial calls.
Right.
There's no team in the history of the NFL that's going to have 12 multi-score comeback from behind wins and win the game that way, especially if the quarterback is playing at like a QBR of like 58, 60. You can't, that's not a thing, guys. It really
Well,
isn't. And
to
this is
further your
this is
point,
what
I
people
mean,
need to realize.
yeah, to further your point, I mean, it almost seems as like the refs in the NFL got caught. And then when they finally started reviewing things in their last game, then it was like, hey, there was some lopsided calls in this, man. The Super Bowl has to be called better than this with not such a blatant obvious things, or a new refing squad has to be put out there because what you were trying to do was pretty screwed up. If that's in fact what you're doing, it is a business, so you're going to do what's good for the business in certain cases. To me, it's more exciting to have a team maybe go 1 or 2 and teams change, a lot because then it still shows that the entire league is still competitive. But then it's like, look, we got
Well,
caught Super Bowl. Hey,
they got
we got
30
to do it
million
right.
extra
We got to play
eyes
right.
on Kansas City Chiefs games.
Yeah,
Third, like so on average, I believe it's like 65 million people watch the NFL on a week to week basis.
Right.
Over 100 million people watch the Super Bowl. But
yeah,
those numbers were inflated for the past couple of seasons to, I believe, around 80 million to 85 million because the Kansas City Chiefs had a spike in viewership on their broadcast because there's Swifties that were tuning in to get a glimpse of their queen.
yeah.
And that's fine and all. But when you realize that 30 million viewers adds to a lot of money and revenue to a broadcast, or especially if you're going to, let's say, sign a new TV deal somewhere or extended TV deal. And the NFL has extended TV deals. They don't ever really sign new contracts unless they're moving from networks to networks. Like when they sign a contract with NBC, versus ABC, which is Disney slash ESPN. It's all the same entity.
Yeah.
You know, that's the only time that they have these contract disputes. Or if, like, for example, Amazon wants to pick up a Chiefs game, they know that Amazon's gonna have a spike in viewership based upon the game that they're gonna pick up if it's a Chiefs game. Now, I understand the money and I understand all of that, but you move away from a legitimate sporting competition
Right.
and into scripted events that closely resemble sports. That's called sports
Scripted
entertainment.
entertainment, would you dare
Exactly.
say?
Well,
Yeah.
here's the thing. Here's the thing. The NFL is listed not as a legitimate sports company. The NFL is listed
This
as a
is
sports
true.
entertainment company.
This is true.
And so unfortunately for us as followers of this sport and as followers of the NFL,
And that's
we
former
have
players.
to yes, and we have to remember
Yeah.
that although these guys are legitimate athletes, there are aspects of these games that are going to be scripted, and there's nothing that we can do about it.
Yeah.
To
It's
that
just
point,
how obvious is it? Is what because if you can make it, I mean, let's be honest. The other side of this podcast, if you can make it look real enough, it becomes way more entertaining.
right.
So that's how you're going to make the games exciting by constantly having close games where the calls are, ooh, it's a little iffy here, and yeah, he got away with one there, but as long as at the end of the game, the pros and the cons of the roughing squad are not tallied up, where it's super one sided, you can get away with it for a long, long time. But as Cortez was saying, when you've got hundreds of millions of people worldwide checking out the sport now, they're gonna know. Wait a minute, this is one game. It's not a series of games too, where you can make it up next time. It's one time elimination. You better get it right that one time because there's no way to make that back up. And if you all of a sudden are seen as messing up calls and constantly, oh man, well they got away with this and then oh oops, like no man, because you're gonna lose that viewership in the following season and into the following playoffs. So it's smart, like it was entertaining for a while. You can see what their point was that they were trying to make, but they brought it back to the sheer athleticism of the game, and that's what I was excited to see. Because, like I said, I was only investing one quarter of play watching it this time, and then if it
That's all
was
you needed to be
lopsided,
invested in. That game was over in the
Yeah,
first quarter.
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, and then see, then it became a whole thing of. Can they shut them out? I mean, this can kind of be interesting, where you
Well,
got
you knew
this
they weren't
team.
going to shut them out
No,
because
I know.
there are guys like Harrison Bucker who can kick the ball 70 yards, and they're in
Yeah,
the dome. So
yeah.
and the
But it would have been
Superdome is known
interesting to
for
see him
booming
shut out for
kicks.
3 quarters, though. Could you imagine 3 quarters shutout? I mean, that'd be pretty impressive all its own.
I
I mean,
mean,
I
they, I mean,
mean,
I mean, I
the whole
mean,
thing was impressive.
they basically
yeah,
got very close to that because I mean, the first touchdown for the Chiefs wasn't scored until like 1 minute or 2 minutes left in third.
Two
And
minutes left in the third quarter,
yeah,
yeah,
less than
and
that maybe. Yeah,
he
yeah,
had to fight. Like Patrick Mahomes had to jump out of bounds to throw across his body to a receiver that was coming back. One of the fastest guys on the field, which is Worthy,
exactly.
who's also a rookie.
Yep.
yeah.
But I have to say there's something that some people overlooked. The Eagles have the biggest offensive line in the history of football.
And the biggest
Yeah.
defensive line.
Yes, both their lines are so the guys who drafted and signed these guys need a raise because
Yeah.
you could have had
Roseman,
you could
sorry,
have had
let me just make this point because what you just said. Howie Roseman has now won a Super Bowl with two different head coaches. He's the first GM ever to ever do that. He has won it with Doug Peterson and he's won it with Nick Sirianni, in the span of an 8-year, less than 10-year span, which is incredible. He's made three
yes.
Super Bowls, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, let me one more step for pass back to Cortez, right? Jalen Hurts is now the third quarterback and the first quarterback in the 21st century to lose his first Super Bowl start and come back and win it. And I mean, against the same team, which has not happened.
Against the same team,
which has never happened in history, which has never happened before. So we saw history be made last night. Sorry, let me go
the
back.
Buffalo Bills couldn't do it.
Yeah.
The Dolphins couldn't do it.
And the Niners. So, anyways, back to your point about about viewership, because you guys made a really good point. I want to bring up this point too about because Marcus, your point about scripting. I really just want to get on this before we kind of get away from it.
Yeah.
Reality's perception is reality, right? You show me something, and there's enough of the unexpected, kind of, I'll believe it's real.
Right. 51% is enough to push it anything. That's how you round up. I mean, that's enough for you to start to believe because you're now more than halfway believing. So it's like sleight of hand almost, you know.
Exactly. I feel last year's Super Bowl was scripted. And
Yeah.
I feel Kyle Shanahan deliberately, I mean, whether or not, he deliberately threw the game, it felt very scripted in terms of kind of how the NFL wanted to shape out. Maybe Kyle didn't throw the game. I don't know. But he lost twice now to Andy Reid and the Chiefs. And I think both those games were within he grasped defeat from the jaws of victory both times, right? 2010 lead
Yeah.
against the Chiefs in Super Bowl 54 with 8 minutes left in the game in fourth quarter in regulation. And then again in Super Bowl, last year, Super Bowl 58 in Vegas. They were up 10-0, and the Chiefs ended up outscoring 25-12 to win in overtime. To your point about viewership and kind of the scripting and how much it tapped the interest. This year's Super Bowl had 126 million viewers, which set a new record. Last year's Super Bowl had 123 million viewers, but it had 200 million people tune in at one point, especially once it got to overtime, which was the most viewed broadcast since Apollo 13 or Apollo 11 landing when Neil
Yeah,
Armstrong
Apollo 11.
landed on the moon. So 55 years. There was no other broadcast which was more viewed than last year's Super Bowl, and it was the longest game ever played in Super Bowl history with over 74 minutes played with regulation and overtime to go to the last 7 seconds of overtime where the Chiefs, ended up winning on the corn dog play from Mahomes and McCall Hardman. So it's back to the point. Perception's reality, right? You gave me enough kind of, ebbs and flows, but I just saw opportunities the Niners could have won it and they just didn't punch it in. They didn't put their foot on their throats and they just said no. But then the Chiefs somehow they let them hang around in there and the Chiefs ended up coming back and winning, right? And that to me kind of, I'm like, damn, they actually lost this game. But then I'm like, oh, you know what? It was close enough. I maybe this was
Exciting. Yeah.
maybe the Niners weren't that team, but they actually on paper they were a much more talented team than the Chiefs were last year. Chiefs had no business being the Super Bowl last year either, in my opinion.
Mm.
So I feel that because of these reasons, I'm really happy. I don't like the Eagles, but I'm happy the Chiefs lost for this reason, and I'm happy that it was a fair call game. The reason why we're hyping on the refs, and the reason why we sound like haters, folks, is because DeAndre Hopkins came out after the game and said, "I hope y'all are happy about the refs because you saw what happened. Now they screwed us over, this and that." Obviously, DeAndre, is this D Hop's first Super Bowl, so I mean, we'll give him.
Yeah, he's gonna be in his feelings.
Yeah, he's gonna be his feelings a lot, but honestly, bro, no, man. I mean, y'all been on the favorable side of these calls way too long. Okay,
Yeah.
it's cost my team 2 championships. Okay, and I'm happy to see the Chiefs get a taste of their own medicine.
Well, look,
By no
I
means.
almost feel like it's one of those where I think that even all the way up to a point where even the coaches know what is expected of them at game time. You know what I mean? Because like, how many times have you seen a coach just blow a call completely? I mean, look at the Eberflus game where there's 30, almost 40
7
seconds
times
left.
in Chicago this year. 7 times.
Yeah, exactly. Where there's a play that they should have called it into the game, should have called a timeout, anything, and you're screaming at the screen like, "What are you doing?" It doesn't make any sense. It's not like he got lost in that long of time. Like there was that 30-second time where he could have called the timeout third down.
30. It was 36 seconds.
Exactly.
On third down.
Yeah.
36 seconds on third down, and I believe they were on like the opposing team's 32. And
they could have gotten
needed,
one more play in to gain some yards. They were scared they can. Yeah.
They only needed a field goal to win the game.
Yep.
And this happened on multiple occasions. Also, I called this out last year. If you guys want to go back and look at some of our old videos from last year, I called out that the Bears had to be intentionally losing games with Justin Fields because there was zero way that some of those games would go the way that they were going. On top of it, we found out that Caleb Williams had been in the Bears facilities 4 months before draft day.
Yeah.
4 months before draft day, if not longer. So for those of you who are uninitiated and do not know, Justin Fields knew that he was no longer a Chicago Bear during the season.
Yeah, they got to play
during
it off.
the season last year,
Yeah,
which made no sense because they still had a shot at the point of which that we were at. I believe the Bears were like 4-6 at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a shot in their division because the division that year gave them a chance to make it. This year, they wouldn't have had a shot. They wouldn't have had a shot after week 6.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And which is crazy because they were 4-1 at week 5. If you remember, at week 5, the Chicago Bears were 4-1,
Mm.
and out of nowhere, they just forgot how to play football.
Yeah. And I think it's even. I mean, look at it. Like I think that the players don't have as much a clue to what's going on the field. 100%. I don't think it's more like, all right, the coaches know. All right, well, around this time, I'm going to call this. If it plays out a certain way, then this is what we'll do next. So, you can audible even the play calling and the next play because you already have it scripted. What you're going to be doing here. All right, well, I'm going to have this, this, and this. So it's almost like the game is already scripted out to a point where the score isn't necessarily going to be known, but the outcome will be known. It's like, all right, well, if you guys are getting this far ahead, you're going to get a holding call on this thing. You're going to do this, this, and this. Hey, make sure so and so holds on to so and so or face masks. Because it's like, how many times have you also seen players make really stupid mistakes, like you're saying, the holding calls. I mean, I understand that it's hard to just to move a man, that's coming at you in a certain sense, but
There's
to
holding
flat
on
out
every play.
grab a jersey when you don't even have to close your hand, come on, man. Like,
There's holding on every play
yeah,
ever in the NFL. There's
yeah,
holding on just about every football team. It's on every single play. It's whether or not the refs choose to call it.
yeah,
There is,
I've never
there's
seen a
but there's
game
no,
where
no,
there
hold on,
hasn't been hold
there
on.
is. But what I'm referring to when I say the Chiefs didn't you got the benefit of the doubt with zero holding calls on the offensive line, all 3 of the Super Bowl wins. If you look at the tape again, back to Nick Bosa, love him or hate him, we're not going to get in a political debate, right? Look at the film from Super Bowl 54 from 5 years ago. Look at the film from Super Bowl 58 last year. Look at the final drive, the final play of Super Bowl 58 from last year. Okay, Nick Bosa tries to go up and through Jawan Taylor,
Mm-hmm.
who goes like this, literally bear hugs him.
He bear hugged him. He bear hugged him.
Yeah, he was wrapping him, and Bosa can go free. I don't understand how that's not a hold.
yeah,
It is.
yeah,
No, it is 100% is. And the internet called it out when it happened too.
Yeah.
yeah,
There's one thing that's painstakingly obvious. They will let you play until you get to a point of, like, for example, if you get to a point of a dynasty, they will help you along a little bit. The reason why Tampa is, well, I'll say the first 2 Super Bowls that the Patriots won, and then the Super Bowl against Atlanta and Tampa, where Tom Brady's favorites is, he defied the NFL.
Right.
He defied the NFL, and it was pretty obvious because all those games, like you saw it when in the what was it, 2022, the playoffs against the Rams. You can't tell me that that something wasn't scripted there. How are you playing cover 2 and you're the over the top safety and you let Cooper Kupp run past you? Number one, and then before that, you had the ridiculous holding call against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that made no sense whatsoever when they were driving down the field to seal the game up. If you remember, the Rams were behind in that game, and they came and won that game in the last second. Next thing you know, they win the Super Bowl that year. Do I think that had something to do with the fact that, like, and you notice Brady retires afterwards, which he had plenty of life left in him. Retired a whole year early. And remember, he had a whole another year in his contract. He didn't sign the contract to just not play out the contract. That's not very Tom Brady like, is it? The league will tell you. The same thing happened to Montana. The same thing happened to Young. The same thing happened to Aikman. If they want you out, they will get you out. And you're either going to go out when they say that you should leave the league, or you're going to go out on your back. And I think that there's a lot of guys that didn't want to go out on their back. Montana chose the hard way.
Yeah.
And you can tell. You can tell it from the way that he played. Favre chose the hard way. They wanted him out the league. Your time was up. They wanted the new guy in there.
And eventually, if the league wants you out, you end up going out, like you said, either on your own volition or on your back. So ultimately, Montana, essentially.
Since we're talking about San Francisco, so this is not a political statement, guys. So please understand this. Kaepernick won a lawsuit against the NFL. He won the lawsuit against the NFL in a court of law. They determined that there was enough evidence to show that the NFL owners were all in collusion against one player. Now, you cannot tell me, was it the Rooney Rule? the Rooney Rule, that means that coaches need. I think it's called the Rooney Rule, isn't it? The coaches need to be able to, or uh, organizations need to interview black coaches as well,
Yeah, the
and
Rooney Rule.
if they have a coaching vacancy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like if there's a qualified black coach, they have to
They have to
interview him.
interview a minority, at least one.
You know,
So,
that's the rule. It's just so. If why do you think that that rule came about if they couldn't use their influence to change the careers of players? You can't tell me that they can't if they had to create a rule to make sure that people got opportunities, but between all of the teams, and we're talking about all of the teams,
right.
the NFL was found liable for collusion and supporting collusion between every team. It wasn't just a lawsuit against the San Francisco 49ers. It was against the NFL as an organization. Every team was involved. There was emails that proved that owners were saying, "Hey, no, don't give them a shot." There was people like Pete Carroll who would bring him in to give him a workout, but they didn't consider him, even though what he put up during the workout was better than what they had.
Oh, yeah.
Well, didn't he
I'm
host his own workout at one point just so coaches could freely come and see him? Wasn't that a thing at one point when he
Well,
was?
he wanted the
Yeah.
world to see that he still had it because
Yeah. Okay.
the NFL wanted to do a closed, non-filmed, non-televised
Workout.
workout,
Yeah.
and he said, "What workouts are non-filmed, non-televised, no social media? What age is this that we don't do this? You guys film high school players who come to a combine. Why wouldn't you film this? Why wouldn't you allow this tape to get out?
Yeah.
And why wouldn't you release which teams are showing up?" And then there's only about 5 to 6 teams that even showed up to begin with at this workout when all 32 teams were invited to participate.
Yeah. I mean, not everybody's going to show up because not everybody needs a quarterback per se, but just even for the just simple fact of signing them to even a smaller role on the team could have been a thing. I mean,
Let's see what happened here. Denver needed a quarterback. Seattle needed a quarterback. San Francisco still needed a quarterback. Dallas needed a quarterback because their quarterbacks were injured back-to-back years. Chicago needed a quarterback. Jacksonville needed a quarterback. Miami needed a quarterback. This is before Tua, if you remember. Miami needed a quarterback. The Giants needed a quarterback. Eli was aging and about to leave the league. The Jets always need a quarterback. I mean, I'm not even halfway done yet. This is before Josh Allen, too. The Bills needed a quarterback. Las Vegas needed a quarterback. I mean, I'm not even halfway through the league, and I found 10 teams already that needed quarterbacks. And we're
Yeah.
talking about a quarterback that was fresh off a Super Bowl appearance that almost won the Super Bowl. Now, is some of his personal conduct, was that called into question? But you have to ask the question of what did he do, especially in today's society, what did he do that was bad enough to get blackballed from the NFL? Now, we're not going to dive into this because we've already been through this on this channel. We've already done this.
A lot.
Guys, go watch the video
Yeah.
from 4 years ago if you want to talk about this.
Yeah.
But I'm just bringing this up to say, if the league wants something, they usually get it. And this is a situation where the Eagles, number one, the Eagles weren't going, and number two, the referees weren't going to have their integrity called into question about how they're going to call this game because they knew that if they did call this game to favor another team when another team was not up to par, that it would be very translatable and on this grand of a stage. We're talking about the most viewed Super Bowl ever.
Mm.
I mean, and obviously, kind of back to the point, right? I mean, like DeMarcus, you said this, and I agree. I think with the fans kind of waking up and everyone causing uproar, and Roger Goodell actually making a statement saying it's ridiculous to think the referees rigged the games right before the game.
Right.
I mean, the timing was too suspect for me. I just think, obviously the Chiefs were so bad last year, but then because the receiver stepped up in the playoffs, everyone believed Patrick Mahomes was Superman, and everyone believed, oh yeah, Patrick Mahomes because he owns the Niners. Yeah, of course there couldn't be any collusion, there couldn't be any rigging, right? There couldn't be any script, right? But then when I see it on paper, I mean, the referees were letting the Chiefs get away with murder when it comes to holding, or not just holding, other things too, right? And the Niners basically were just, fighting for their lives to kind of get any traction going. Also credit to Steve Spagnuolo and his defense. I mean, players do eventually have to execute, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. Refs can only do so much, right? But I mean, back to the point, I just think, Chiefs got the benefit of way too many calls these last two Super Bowls, and it was good to see them be on the opposite end of that for once. And back to the point of kind of the timing suspect, whether or not it was suspect, that's fine. You know, the league can choose what they want. Next year, the Super Bowl is going to be in San Francisco at Levi Stadium. I don't know if they're going to win, if the 29ers are going to be there. I hope that they make the plays and the trades. And actually, let's actually pay for a bit because I want to talk about this with you guys, okay? Kyle Shanahan is now, so Nick Sirianni was, so last three Super Bowls, Eagles, Niners, Eagles, right? The Super Bowl prior was the Bucks, but then the Super Bowl prior with the Chiefs won their first Super Bowl was against the Niners. So basically, for the active teams and the active coaches, Niners with Kyle Shanahan, then Eagles and Nick Sirianni, then Niners Kyle Shanahan, now Eagles again against the Dynasty Chiefs, right? So the Chiefs wins. What is your take on what Kyle Shanahan's prospects? I mean, do you think Kyle Shanahan, because before Jalen Hurts, no quarterback had actually gone and won the Super Bowl this century, you know, after losing it. Kyle Shanahan has lost twice now. And he's also lost against Brady as OC for the Falcons. Vic Fangio did the same thing though, during like to your point about Colin Kaepernick, Cortez. Vic Fangio was the defensive coordinator of that 49ers defense. And
Yes, he was.
Terrell Brown, guest of the show, was, you know, appreciate you, baby, if you're watching this, number 2-5, right? Terrell Brown, who was on that team, right? On that 2012 Niners Super Bowl run team, right? And Vic Fangio was a DC. So he's elated. He's so happy. All the former Patrick Willis, all the former Niners are elated for Vic Fangio getting his first ring with Philly, right? Do you think Kyle Shanahan has what it takes to win a Super Bowl with the Niners, with their offense and the roster being as good as it is, as set up? And if he does not win next year with the Super Bowl being in Levi Stadium, what is your expectation for?
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, next year for the 49ers is Super Bowl or bust.
Thank you.
And this goes for, unfortunately, this goes for the starting quarterback.
Yes.
This goes for pretty much what we're going to see is they're either going to make the Super Bowl or they're going to retool that entire team.
Yes.
From quarterback, from head coach on down.
Correct.
They will retool that entire team if they don't make the Super Bowl this year. Is it realistic for the 49ers to believe that they can make the Super Bowl next year? Yes. Is it realistic for the 49ers to believe they can play the Super Bowl in their own stadium? Yes. And I think that the front office in San Francisco is going to say the exact same thing. We are a couple of pieces away from making this thing click. They're going to get some salary cap space because there's no way that Debo is in a 49ers uniform next year.
He's gone. Yeah, he's gone.
You know, he's already been seen wearing the Eagles jersey. So
yeah, I know he's gone. Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't. Let's just say that because of the Eagles' history, it would not be strange to see Debo Samuel in an Eagles jersey next year.
AJ Brown's his boy. Yeah,
exactly. It would not be strange. They have a very long history of putting the Debo Samuel type of player in an Eagles uniform, and I think they would do it again, and they have the money for it. If we're being honest, they have the money for it. They had a lot of, like I said earlier, they had a lot of players that were signed to minimum contracts for multiple years, and they can get away with signing a Debo. San Francisco actually has a wealth of opportunity to sign free agents right now with dropping certain players. And they do have an opportunity to get someone like Myles Garrett, who is on the open market. I think that Myles Garrett would have a good time on a defense like San Francisco's. Now, someone might say, well, they need to do something about this. They do something about this. No. If they have a guy like Myles Garrett, coupled with Bosa and some of the other guys they have on defense, that solves a little bit of their problem. And one thing about the National Football League, if you have a stellar defense, you can have an all right offense.
Yeah.
What the Eagles, to that point, thank you. I'm sorry, Marcus, go ahead. And before
I was just kind of agreeing because back to the Chicago Bears. I mean, we made it to a Super Bowl with special teams and defense. We didn't have
no
an offense. No offense whatsoever. Our defense and our special teams scored more points hands down than our offense did that entire season.
Rex Grossman averaged 8 passes a game.
But I mean, the context is key. I mean, y'all, we're not talking about 2006. We're talking about last year. I mean, the Bears.
But I'm saying, but it is possible, like you said, without an offense or with a mediocre offense, if you will, to do such a thing. I mean, it is. So to further the point Cortez is saying, I mean, let's just go back and look at it from a business standpoint. Right. Your team is now a Super Bowl champion. You've got some space on the team now to move a few things around, but like to grab some other players off the 49ers, it's going to happen. And then
The
and
Ravens
then
won a Super Bowl with a mediocre offense.
mm,
But
yeah.
Joe Flacco, that postseason, context is key, bro. Joe Flacco was 11-0 touchdown in INT ratio that postseason. He tied Joe
Yeah,
Montana,
he was a game managed quarterback
but
with a
was a
stellar defense.
but he was elite in the postseason. That's
Yeah, he
that's
was great in
that's
the
that's the
postseason.
key. No, that's the key because you have to realize Joe Flacco went into Denver, beat Denver in double overtime with Peyton Manning. Then he went to New England and beat Tom Brady and the New England Patriots in Foxborough. Then
Yes, he
he
did.
beat, yeah, then he beat Colin Kaepernick and I mean I hate to admit this, but if the lights didn't go out, that game would have been exactly what we saw last night for the Niners.
Oh,
Yeah.
if the
Yeah,
if
you
the
know,
lights didn't
so
go out, the Niners would have beat the crap out of Baltimore.
It
no,
was
no,
it
no,
was a temperature change for sure. Yeah,
no.
definitely.
Ravens would have beat the crap out of Niners if the lights didn't go
Oh
out.
yeah, the,
It
the
would have
lights
been
going
20.
out, it definitely cooled the old ass Ravens down.
But I'm saying so. Back to what I'm thinking, kind of what you guys just said, right? Yes, they have to make the right moves. The reason why I brought this up is because of what you guys started off with and what you went back to. The Eagles drafted their entire defensive line in the last 2 years.
Yep,
They also drafted their entire offensive line within the past 10 years.
yep.
Kyle Shannon's philosophy has been to get away from having traditional big hogs clogging up the lanes on the offensive line. And he's only had one premier pass rusher, which is Nick Bosa. Everyone else has been interchangeable. Kyle needs to have a fundamental philosophy change with building up the trenches to protect his investment at quarterback with Brock Purdy. They're going to pay him $60 million or whatever the hell ungodly figure they're going to pay him. And to also kind of replicate the success that we saw from the Eagles last night, which is ferocious, punch you in the mouth, defensive line. We're going to knock your quarterback on his ass and we're going to beat the dog shit out of you. And ain't fucking jack shit y'all can fucking do about it because we're the
Yeah.
big
Let
bad
me ask you a
dogs.
question.
Go ahead. Oh, you got to smile. Come on, go ahead, baby.
2 years ago,
Mhm.
I made a statement about why certain teams are losing games in the National Football League.
Mhm.
And we started that off with the B word, blocking.
Right.
Blocking on both sides of the ball is integral to success in a football league.
Yep.
Now, the NFL had gotten away from blocking for quite a while, and it was deemed that the running back position was obsolete in the National Football League.
Yeah.
And there have been many teams that have moved away from the running back model. Now, the funniest thing about this season is the teams that did not have a premier running back and the teams that did not have premier blocking backs and blocking linemen lost badly this
Badly.
year.
Yes. Yes.
Badly. Their
Yes.
protection was horrible.
Right.
Now, I'm sorry, Pacheco. I am not a jerk about this, but you are not a blocking back. And your quarterback was seen running for his life all night because the Eagles were almost unimpeded to Patrick Mahomes on just about every snap last night.
And
He didn't
they
have very
even
many
blitz. They blitzed twice yesterday, they said.
Yeah,
That's
they
my
didn't have to
point.
blitz.
Marcus,
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
that's exactly my point. This is why Kyle needs to have a fundamental philosophy change. Because if you build your front four, the Niners, when they made the Super Bowl in 2019 against the Chiefs, that
Mhm.
front four, that defensive line was so nasty, bro. Like just up
Yeah.
front. DeForest Buckner, D Ford, Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa, who's a rookie at that point, right?
Yep.
You had 6'7", 6'8" motherfuckers just clogging up the lanes, eating up anyone who tried to come through, just demolishing opposing offensive linemen. And now that they got Robert Saleh back from the Jets, that philosophy is coming back.
If your job is to be an object in the way of something else, does it not make sense to be the bigger object?
Exactly.
Like I don't know. I don't even understand why it's it's the question because it's so stupidly obvious. Like if
There's
you
a
had an
guy
offensive line,
in Miami. There's a guy in Miami who believed and had some success with the philosophy of smaller, more agile players, and it worked for a little bit until his quarterback got beamed 17 times.
Yeah.
And now they're starting to see that the concussions, the arm injuries, the leg injuries, and the hits to the head on your quarterback are a problem because hey, these little small midget run quarterbacks are not going to be able to one see over the line, so I got to get a smaller line. Well, guess what? If a team comes with a bigger line, we're in trouble because those bigger guys are still fast, are still training,
Yeah.
and that little bit of an extra step that you get from being 15 to 20 pounds lighter and 4 to 5 inches shorter on the line is not going to help you when that guy is huge and agile. So what we've seen is overall domination from a very physical front line on both sides of offense and defense, and teams that were built for more of the new age NFL streamline. We're passing the ball down the field 40 yards every play, like what we had been seeing for a couple of seasons. We're starting to see that go away again, especially when you have big bruising running backs starting to return to prominence in the league. Guys who are,
Yeah.
we call it the 200-pound club. So when you start to see the 200-pounders making a comeback in the running back, because remember, running backs were starting to get as small as 155, 165 in the NFL. They're if you guys don't believe me, go look at some of the numbers of some of the smaller guys, who've been running the ball lately for the last couple of years. They're down to 165, 175, even 155-pound running back. That was who was that guy in Baltimore that was 155 pounds? He was a little guy, and these guys are they're starting to get phased out again because you got 215, 225-pound Saquon running at you. You got 230-pound, 235-pound Derrick Henry running at you. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do now when Derrick Henry's bigger than your linebackers and your D line?
And Derrick Henry's 260, bro. Let's be honest. He's not 235.
Yeah,
He's a
no, he's
260-pound
260.
man.
235 is an NFL lie. He's
Yeah,
260.
he's
You know what I'm
260.
saying? And he's bigger. He's bigger than some of the guys that we've seen on defense and starting on defense on some of these other teams. What do you think was going to happen?
Right. No, absolutely. Kind of to the
Well,
point. Yeah, go, Marcus.
oh, sorry. Yeah, just look at it this way. If you have to compare these like two teams on the field as let's say armies, right? And I'm a big history buff, so let's say they're two armies. You can't win an entire battle all at once with just snipers
Right.
because you're gonna have guys sneaking through the line. That's fine, that works until the defense figures it out and they adapt and change. And you're bringing back these giganto, huge linemen again on defense, and then you finally starting to realize, oh, we don't have to be quicker because if you're gonna plug up a hole, there's no hole for them to run through. It's just like bringing battle tanks onto the battlefield. So, okay, are snipers gonna take out a battle tank? Absolutely not. There's no way. There's no way. You can't get through. There's nothing you can do about it. It doesn't matter if your quarterback is standing out there all day long. If you've got guys that are able to just easily throw an arm out because they're not even impeded at the time because the smaller offensive line is trying to block for you, it makes no sense. If you the whole point of the line is for protection, right? So why would I want to stand behind a wall that's only 4 feet tall, and then the other guy in front of me is 6 feet tall? And it still has the ability to extend their arms even farther out than that. It makes no sense. There's no protection there. It's like your kid hugging your waist.
And that's the
Most
issue.
blocked field goals in 20 years this year, by the way, guys. Most
Exactly.
blocked field goals in 20
Yeah,
years.
No,
yeah.
exactly. And no, that's the point, Marcus, because Kyle has kind of focused on shiftier, faster offensive linemen for the zone blocking and the run
Mm,
scheme, which is effective for running backs like Christian McCaffrey, who carry or Jordan Mason, right? But what he needs to transition to is big, nasty hogs up front who are good at backing up and burying motherfuckers in the dirt. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
That's the point I'm trying to get to, and that's what the Niners need to do to get back to the Super Bowl and actually not just get back, but to actually win it. That missing element is the Eagles showed it. The tush push works. Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, Mekhi Becton, them boys up front are
Absolutely.
huge, nasty motherfuckers who can just basically impose their will at will. Without Jason Kelce, by the way, who retired last year, this team was actually better on the offensive line in many respects because of Saquon and Jalen Hurts and the dynamicism of the offense. So that's what the Niners need to replicate, if anything. Brock Purdy will never be the runner that Jalen Hurts is. That's fine. But Brock Purdy, in my opinion, is more can and should, honestly, if they're going to pay him that money that he wants, he should be a better passer than Jalen Hurts is. And the
He
Niners,
can be. He can be. They need to get him an offensive line that can protect him.
that's exactly what the point is. And they need to restock the defensive line so Nick Bosa has some more help. Opposite Nick Bosa, you have a premier, maybe a second. I don't know if you're going to get Myles Garrett, but
This year is going to be good because the draft is very rich in linemen
it is.
this year.
It is.
The draft is. I would not be surprised if a lot of names are taken that we don't recognize, but are going to be stars in the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean,
You're not looking for a whole bunch of wide receivers this year. This is not a quarterback draft. This is not a quarterback draft. Let's just keep it on. This is not a quarterback draft that's coming up.
Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, you do have some talent there, but you're right. I mean, those are probably the only two that are kind of sticking out like, wow. I would say, this is pretty much other positions like Abdul Carter coming out of Penn State, as an edge rusher is one of the big names. Mason Graham coming out of Michigan, from the interior, defensive line. He's also, if not, he is going to be a generational type talent.
Ohio State's line is going to get drafted. Most of those guys are gone.
And Ohio State's offensive lineman is on the Niners board most likely. I forgot his name, Josh Simmons. How can I forget his name? Josh Simmons coming out of Ohio State. Oh wait,
there'll be some guys from Michigan, a couple guys from Notre Dame. There's the Big Ten schools are going to be heavy.
Team, man. I can't even.
Yeah, Big Ten schools are going to be heavily pilfered this year because the Big Ten did their thing. The Midwest in general did their thing in college football this year, and there's going to be a bunch of guys. There's going to be a bunch of corn-fed, guys that are going to be drafted into the NFL this year from little-known towns that we rarely hear about. We know.
Are we dare saying we're getting some true Americans out there?
We're gonna have some, and it's gonna be great. And I for one am happy because I got really tired of the way that football is being played. We didn't have we didn't have 1,000-yard rushers. Could you imagine? Could you imagine more NFL football being played without 1,000-yard rushers? You got guys that are playing 16 plus games that aren't rushing for 1,000 yards. You can't average 80 yards a game. Well, no, of course not. Your quarterback's throwing the ball 45 times.
And sorry, to the point about what you said about the running back position and how it used to be a narrative. Oh, it's a passing league. The running back position is dying. Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, right? I mean, it's not dying. They're becoming more dynamic and they're becoming bigger and faster and stronger, in between the tackles. It's incredible to see the evolution of the position for the running back. To obviously, to your point, Cortez, about blocking, to be pass blockers like Christian McCaffrey is coming out of the backfield, who can also line up at receiver like Saquon did and had a nice-ass catch, right? I mean, it's incredible to just see that. And I think last point is what I want to say about the Niners and kind of the Eagles and kind of Super Bowl in general and kind of the outlook, right? For both conferences and obviously the future of the league, at least for the next 5 to 10 years. I think the Eagles are going to, they're set. I mean, that whole, I hate to admit, but they are. I mean, offensive line, defensive line, really good talent on both sides of the ball. Jalen Hurts is only 26 years old. I mean, AJ Brown's 27. Saquon's 28. I mean, there's too much youth on that team. And, they're going to be competing for a while. The Chiefs.
Even if they don't make it next year for some reason,
they won't make it.
With the off chance.
They won't make it. They won't.
The Chiefs are getting blown up.
Let's just say. But if they don't, they will be there again within the next 5 years for sure.
Exactly. No, that's the point. No, because look, the Eagles, they made, so the reason I'm saying they won't make it is because look at the trajectory of the league, right? Outside of the Chiefs, how many teams have made it back to the Super Bowl after winning or losing? Right?
Yeah.
Seattle did it in 2014, 2015. Before Seattle, it was the Patriots. In 2005. That was a 10-year span. And then after Seattle, it was the Patriots again. And then after the Patriots, it was the Chiefs. But it was like an 8-year span between, or 6 to 7 year span between the Patriots and the Chiefs. So teams, historically speaking, even in modern times, don't make it back even if they win. So
Las Vegas hasn't made it back. Chicago hasn't made it back. Indianapolis hasn't made it back. Um,
Cortez. I'm talking about teams that win. I'm not talking about teams who are like at the bottom
Who
of.
appear. Yeah.
we're saying like
No,
even you mentioned even teams that win. I'm thinking of teams that haven't made it back. Like the Bills haven't made it back
the
since
Bills
they
have gotten
lost four
close.
times in a row.
The Bills have
I mean,
gotten close.
they made
Yeah,
it four times in a row and then haven't been back. They lost all four of them.
right.
Dallas hasn't sniffed. Dallas hasn't
Don't
sniffed
do that to me, bro. I can't
I
laugh
know,
at a team on my
seriously.
serious podcast.
Super
I can't.
Bowl.
Fuck the Cowboys.
Like,
And
the
fuck the
Redskins
Chiefs.
got close this year. I mean, Minnesota got close. Detroit's gotten close, but they haven't won. Like I said, the NFC is going to be a lot harder to call, but we do know where the powerhouses are, and we do know who has the capability. We know that the entire NFC North is going to be a powerhouse. There's nothing you can do about it. It's unavoidable. We
Yeah.
know that San Francisco is going to continue to be a dominant force in the West. We know that, and we know that the Eagles are going to be dominant in the East. As far as the AFC goes, shoot them in the foot. You know what I'm saying? Like they got a whole lot of retooling and most of the and don't forget about Tampa. Tampa's sneaky. But the AFC's got some work to do. The Chargers got some work to do. Kansas City's they're either if they don't get blown up this year, I'll be very surprised. Um, the Bills are the Bills. They just are the Bills. We'll see what they do next year. Um, but I mean, Baltimore's Baltimore. You just got to see what they're going to do because you never really know. And there's a lot of stuff they got to do. Nobody cares about the Giants or the Jets, so let's just not talk about them.
Oh, the
Jacksonville's the same
Jets.
way.
I
I
mean, the
mean,
question. No, to your point about the AFC, the question. I actually think it's going the other direction because what I'm saying about the Super Bowl loser hasn't made it back to the Super Bowl since the Patriots did in 2019. Like
yeah,
the Chiefs, when they lost their last Super Bowl, they lost to Joe Burrow in the AFC Championship game the next year.
Joe Burrow's not back yet.
So I mean, I'm predicting for both conferences, we're probably gonna have two different teams in the Super Bowl next year. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned,
Guaranteed. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's gonna happen. It'll be
right?
two new teams that we haven't seen for a while, or two fan bases that really need to be in the Super Bowl. And I
Yeah.
think that there's, like I said, San Francisco's a couple pieces away from being an honest contender.
Not just a contender, but an actual champion because they've been contending. They just haven't
You
won.
know,
You know,
they're a couple pieces away, and I think they can do it, and I think
Well,
they
and
can
then
pull
to
it off.
Cortez's point, you have a fan base that could use it. I mean, Chicago. I'm just saying. You got some things moving.
got
I
some.
I, I predicted that
What y'all got moving?
I predicted the Bears were two seasons out from being
Yeah,
serious contenders.
yeah.
Um, and that's just like let Detroit age a little bit. I think
Well, the Bears got to
Minnesota's
gel together too. I mean, they need a season to gel properly.
yeah, they're at
Yeah.
least two seasons. Like if they made a run, I wouldn't be surprised. I think they'd get stopped at the latest, the divisional round. I think they get stopped in the division round at the latest. And I
I
think the
would say
Chicago
they would
fan
have a
base,
winning record at best. I don't know if they're going to be playoff bound just because of how the NFC North is. I I just think that it's going to be pretty close. If they make it to
well,
the
I
first
think that's the
round,
reason they can be playoff bound is because of how the NFC North is.
yeah.
If the Bears didn't have a catastrophic fall off at week 6 and didn't win a game again until the end of the season, you got to think they were 4-1.
Yeah,
And they weren't
that's
playing
true.
bad. They were playing good football. They were playing good football. And Caleb wasn't playing good football, but the Bears were.
Yeah. Well,
Caleb didn't have a
when you
touchdown
send
pass for weeks.
your crown prince out there with in a gunfight with no protection. I mean,
Yeah.
things are gonna happen, dude. You don't have options to throw because you got no time to throw, and
Do you
then
understand? I mean, do you understand my point about building the trenches?
right,
You
yeah,
just
Yes.
and
said.
back to your point. Yeah,
I
is
mean,
exactly what
If
it's fundamental football. I mean, if you don't have the time to protect and you're not protecting your most valuable asset on the field, which is the quarterback, you're
yeah,
not going to win.
the Bears had the best red line defense, not red line, the best red zone defense in football this season.
yeah.
What that means is that the Bears offense could not protect their quarterback. And as you
Right.
saw, they could not protect their quarterback. If the Bears had an offensive line this year, we might be having a different discussion on who was in the Super Bowl this year. And that's only a 1 year microcosm of what's possible. Am I saying that it was probable? No. But if you start 4-1 with a quarterback that's not producing, only for him to learn the game, have time to throw the football, and produce with the weapons that the Bears had. And no one can deny that the Bears had one of the deepest wide receiver rooms in football.
Yeah.
They had a really good backfield. to the point where they were
Mhm.
able to let go of Tariq Cohen. Okay, and he was producing, but there just wasn't enough space for him. And if they would have had an offensive line, somebody like Swift who can get through the line, who is very similar to
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley. Swift is eerily similar to Saquon Barkley. I don't care what anyone says, and they don't watch football if they don't agree. You know what I mean? Just because, Saquon had the year of his life this year doesn't mean that the other guys that are doing the exact same thing that he's doing don't have it. But I'll tell you what, the Bears don't have an average of 6'6", 345-pound offensive line like the Eagles do.
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference right there. And I think
Yeah.
for today, I gotta rest it there. I think that there's 4 teams in the NFC who need to make some changes immediately to get their lines shored up. And I'm gonna say it with literally gritting my teeth. Green Bay, Chicago, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. If those 4 teams can get their offensive lines together, they're going to be nasty down the stretch.
Yeah.
Especially San Francisco, and especially Chicago, and especially Green Bay, because they all have ridiculous offensive talent on their teams that don't have time to get the football.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, kind of to the point, I mean, Brock Purdy had more time in the pocket because Brock Purdy was able to extend the plays by scrambling. If Brock Purdy had an offensive line that basically allowed him to just drop back and actually settle, a little bit different than how Jalen Hurts played last night. But Brock Purdy basically had the time, back and because he has a pocket presence, Brock Purdy would have been able to basically make a lot more magic happen. I mean, he had a terrible year because of the fact that his receivers were dead last in separation. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing, you saw what happened the year prior, right? Last year when Brock Purdy actually had a somewhat decent offensive line, but they still weren't that good, honestly, because the interior was very soft. And you saw that against the Super Bowl when they didn't even know their blocking assignment. When Chris Jones came again, the Chiefs had a free rusher, and that free rusher was number 95, Chris Jones, who's wreaking havoc, I mean, who's obviously the best defensive tackle in the game. So, I think kind of, yeah, and I'm going to close out with this too. I mean, unless Marcus has some final words, but I'm just going to say, what I'm looking forward to, kind of the outlook after this Super Bowl is Eagles are here. The Eagles are here, guys. I mean, if you didn't believe in Sirianni, if you guys an idiot, he basically proved to you right now. Even regardless of his antics, regardless of his unprofessionalism, right? Nick Sirianni is a winning coach. Period. End of
They'll
story.
be in the NFC Championship if everybody stays healthy.
Right. I mean,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And then not only that, but yeah, Kyle Shanahan, the clock is ticking now, right? Kyle Shanahan is now on the clock. Essentially, you've made 2 Super
Yeah.
Bowls in the last 4 years. You haven't won. You've come short against the same team. You saw the other team who that team beat, come up on the other end, right, with a fair kind of officiating
He's
crew.
got 4 games. Shanahan's got 4 games. If he doesn't prove himself in those first 4 games, they'll fire him.
No, they won't fire him in the first 4 games. They're going to fire
Yeah.
him.
That's too
You
short a
don't think
time.
so?
Yeah,
No, that's too
because
short a time.
Jed York doesn't know what the fuck he's doing as an owner. I mean, and when he fired Harbaugh 10 years ago, you saw the fallback of that. With Jim Tom
Yeah.
Sula, Chip Kelly, Kyle. Basically, I mean, Jed York is not Eddie DeBartolo. Let's just get that out the window. Eddie DeBartolo, in my opinion, is the greatest owner in NFL history because he went 5-0 in Super Bowls, undefeated before the turn of the millennium. Right, Marcus, you can appreciate that because 80s, 90s, right? 49ers
Yes. Yes.
dominating,
Yes.
right? Montana, Steve Young, right? So
Steve Young. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And the
5 and
catch. Come
0.
on, man.
5 and 0. We were undefeated up before the Niners made back against the Ravens. So what I'm looking forward is Kyle. He's gonna have to break a streak which has not yet been broken. Team coaches who have made the Super Bowl in the first 2 appearances and lost have not gone back to win it. So that's going to be something that against Kyle, historically speaking. But if he can do that, and if he can do it on his own home field, with Brock Purdy's contract extension going to be being inked up this offseason, and kind of with the lack of wiggle room to work with the salary cap, and if the Niners front office, I mean, it's also going to be them too. It's going to be a collective effort. Niners front office are going to have to make the trades, whether it's a Myles Garrett or whatever type of free agent, wave splash move that they make in free agency. They're going to have to make the trade and go all in to basically make this last run. Maybe it's the last dance. It's not really last dance because they haven't won anything, but really kind of their best opportunity to kind of get that ring is coming up now with the Super Bowl in their own backcourt and, get healthy and restock the French trenches. And then we'll see what happens from there. So I'm going to close out this episode with that. Congrats to the Eagles. congrats to, obviously Jalen Hurts, who's one of my favorite players for his story, for his adversity, his willingness to push through, being benched in the national championship at Alabama, and then coming back, going to reinvent himself at Oklahoma, then getting drafted, and then basically being labeled a gimmick quarterback. I argue with people about this on Facebook before he got drafted. They all said he's going to be a gimmick quarterback, like a taste
Yes,
of
he
milk.
did.
And basically, my man remembers that, right? And Jalen Hurts proved me right. Jalen Hurts is now a Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP quarterback. Congrats to number one, and congrats to the Eagles fan base and Chiefs. They'll still be around as much as we don't like.
Let me say this: our fan base that watches this show, I know you guys are like, oh man, they're not going to do another one. Look, we'll be here.
Yep.
We'll be here. We're going to talk about everything that's going on because it's Monday, and everyone knows that as soon as the parade is over, that's when the feeding frenzy starts. The blood's in the water, and all the teams wake up from their slumber, and we're going to get ready for this draft. We're going to get ready to see who's moving around. We're on Myles Garrett watch for a bunch of different teams, and we're on Debo, see where Debo goes. We're going to see what Chicago chooses to do. We're looking at a lot of different teams and a lot of different stuff that's going to happen in this offseason, and we're committed to reporting about it and also giving our 2 cents on what our teams are doing. So you guys don't stay far away. Obviously, we're going to be talking about wrestling. It's WrestleMania season. So we're going to be talking about that too. Just don't think that we're done with football because we're not. And I'm currently preparing to try and win a gold medal in Greece for the United States of America and see if that can be one of the crowning achievements towards the twilight of what I call this career. I mean, I haven't aged, so I'm still calling it the twilight. I'm not gonna wait to age, but I'm still calling it the twilight.
Hey, bro, I'm
We'll
a
see
man. I'm a
what
man in his
happens.
40s, and I hear I still look good. So you know what I'm saying?
You know,
You guys just
Like,
treated yourself Monday, huh? We all just flexing on here.
dude,
no,
I'm telling
I
you,
didn't wear
man.
any jewelry today. No jewelry,
But you're
none
still
on the neck.
shining, huh?
You still share.
Hey,
Marcus, what are your last thoughts before we close out?
um, I don't know, man. I'm optimistic to see how the league is going to change back to something that's going to be a little bit more recognizable. I believe.
Yeah.
Instead of something that was kind of not, I hate to say scripted because that's not what you want to hear, but it was definitely coached or encouraged, structured to a way where it followed certain parameters, and it's like, oh, this looks familiar. Oh, okay, we're gonna have to judge this. This game's gonna be decided by another field goal. That okay, well, that team came back, and as we were saying before, so the offseason is going to be fun to see how that plays out. I mean, I'm excited for Chicago. Like, I mean, I think we've got some really good keys in place here now with Johnson in play and who he's picking out to see what Chicago's going to do. I mean, yeah, like you said, 49ers are on the clock, man. I don't know. This might be the countdown to the nuke, and we'll see what happens. But, it's like I said, I'm excited. This should be a good season coming up for the NFL. I believe that it should be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more physical, rather than just done by sheer acrobatics and chance and forgetting to call certain things and just nonsense that seems like it's almost like D2 college play. It's like, well, how would you forget that as a coach? You're supposed to be a professional. You're supposed to be the best of the best, and you're making very, very silly mistakes. Players are making silly mistakes. I think that now that the NFL kind of got a little bit of a reality check, like, oh, people are paying attention to this. We've got more eyes on this. We forgot we have more eyes on this. We thought we can kind of sneak one past you. All right, well, then the main game that everybody's supposed to, we'll make sure we play it, a lot more close to the chest. We'll make it a lot more even. We'll make sure everything's called right. And it turned out to be a complete blowout. And then it's like what was it, the Arizona coach back in, what was it, '06, '07? They were who we thought they were. Yeah, the Chiefs
Dennis
are who we
Green,
thought
rest
they
in
Man's
were.
peace.
green. Put some respect on that
Rest
man's
in
name.
Yeah.
peace.
The
Rest in
Bears
They
are
were
who
peace.
who
we
we
thought
thought
they
they were.
were.
They were who we thought they were. I was like, I remember that the orange jerseys, man. I was like, that's what's up, man.
Real football. So
Yeah.
we'll
So
see
it'll
what
be cool
happens
to
this
see the
next season.
return. It'll be cool to see the return of that. I believe that, like you said, building the trenches. This is a huge lineman setup here coming up in the draft. It's going to be cool to see, and I think we got the right coach in Chicago for that. So it'll be cool to see that build up finally, where we can get some protection for our quarterback. Even if it's two guys, that's better than what we had. I mean, Jesus Christ. So it'll be really cool to see some of these teams that, as Cortez says, have tons of potential. They just need a line. And in the NFC, we've already said the four, so we'll see how that plays out. I mean, I think there's going to be some game changers here in the next year. So, and real
Well,
quick,
eyes are on the draft.
shop at me, baby. Amway.com/MyStop/ Marcus Montalvo. I got to plug my stuff.
Amway.com/MyShop/Marcus Montalvo, Cortez
Hey,
Branch at Soul Reaper
Get it
24.
up.
Hit it up. DDOG Podcast on X. Follow us on Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube. Share. Podcasters, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you all for tuning in. It was a great season, a great finish to the season, whether regardless if we like season or not. And we're looking forward to the offseason. Like my co-host of the most stated, we will be back to talk about free agency. Luka Doncic is now in LA Lakers, so we'll be talking about that. It is WrestleMania season, so we'll be talking about that.
Aaron Rodgers says bye-bye.
Yes, sir. And y'all already know what time it is. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe. God bless. Go Niners. Fuck the Chiefs.